afternoon and welcome to General Session number 7 of the AURP 2020 International Virtual Conference. I tell you, I was tired a couple of hours ago. Now I'm invigorated after the discussion we just had with regarding the election. This afternoon, though, to close out the day, we've got a really interesting panel I think everybody is going to like, and it's going to have a decent amount of application to every research park that we're working with. That is tools for improving university and industry engagement. I tell you, we've said for many years that university research parks are the third leg of the stool. We allow for another layer of income to come to the universities that are the anchors for these research parks. And the foundation of that are the industry relationships that exist with the corporate research or with the university researchers. The three people that we have today speaking really understand how to affect those relationships between university researchers and the industry. Let me introduce them. The format of this session is going to be each are going to talk for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back together for about 20 minutes. And at that time, please feel free to send me questions, and I've got some questions. They'll have some interaction with each other, and then we'll have a nice Q&A session. So let me introduce the panelists. The first is my good friend Tony Boconfuso, who is the president of the University Industry Development Partnership, UIDP. Again, a great asset to all of us at AURP as we leverage the relationships that he has around the country, both with the universities and with industry. Then we have Peter O'Neill, who's the director of business development at Fraunhofer USA Center for Experimental Software Engineering. And many of our parks have Fraunhofer, a couple of our parks have Fraunhofer as a tenant. So he's going to speak to the successes that he's had in some of those parks and then globally that Fraunhofer has had. And then finally, Fred Schnoedenberg, who's the founder of Venture Fuel. And, we often are saying, how do we accelerate corporate innovation? And Fred is going to describe that when he gives his comments, and then we'll ask him some more questions about that. So we're going to start off with Tony. Tony's going to spend some time talking about UIDP and some tools that he has for improving university, industry, research, and partnerships. Tony?
All right. Well, great. Well, really honored to be part of this event. I've always enjoyed attending AURP meetings in person and enjoy the opportunity to meet with people and see folks. Obviously, we're all having to do things a little differently this year. We've been forced to do these meetings online as well over the past, 9 months, I guess, or 8 months. And it's certainly changing the dynamics, but we're certainly learning some new things from that. So I just want to thank, once again, AURP and the organizers for inviting me to be part of this panel. I look forward to the discussion. I know many of you know about the UIDP, so I'll try not to bore you all too much, but for those of you who don't know anything about us, the UIDP is a organization of the willing. We're a global membership association comprised of leading multinational companies from all sectors. We have banks and insurance companies and Silicon Valley companies and pharmaceutical companies and consumer product companies and defense manufacturers, and mostly large research-intensive universities. The vast majority are in the United States, but we also have a small but growing number of non-US based universities. We were started in 2006 as an activity of the National Academies in Washington, and the purpose and the reason that we were created was to address a lot of the challenges around university industry partnerships. There had been a series of meetings in the early 2000 time period where people were trying to find ways to remove barriers to collaborations, and there was a lot of concern about the time it took to get agreements into place, and that's really where we got our start. So in 2006, we were launched about this time, actually, in December 2006. In 2015, we graduated from the National Academies, and we're now a standalone 501c3 organization based in Columbia, South Carolina. And our organization has 170 of the best members in the world. You can look online if you want to look at our membership, and I know many of you all are members. And we're a practical group. We're a do tank, as I like to describe. We try to get things done by finding practical ways to remove barriers to collaborations and finding new ways to collaborate. So, when we talk about tools, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, we really focus on strategies for how to extract more value from collaborations. So we don't lobby, we don't write policy papers. We do a lot of practical things associated with corporate academic engagement. So, when thinking about how to do those kind of partnerships and how to extract value, because I think that's what we're all trying to focus on. We did a report back actually before we even started, before we were formally an organization and activity in the National Academy, and we identified 3 guiding principles. And I always like to tell people about this because I think it's really important to keep these in mind. These are not things that are going to change over time, and that's why they're called guiding principles. And sometimes we lose sight of the fact on these 3 things. So let me just reflect on those for a minute. If you want companies to partner with you and you're at a university, it has to be in the interest of both parties to do that. So I know that sounds common sense. I think sometimes we lose sight of that. So companies will work with universities when it's in their inherent self-interest, and vice versa. University researchers or tech park folks should work with companies when it's in their interests. Secondly, and I think this is an accelerating trend, there is a movement for companies to do more activities with fewer universities. And so, the question is, how do you become a strategic partner to a company? Because that's where you're going to really get the most value, because they're going to work with you collaboratively across what we call the partnership continuum, doing everything from purchasing, as a university, you might be purchasing supplies and buying them from a vendor. They might be sponsoring research, hiring your students. They may be making philanthropic gifts. They may be putting a location on your research park. So in the totality of that, and knowing all the ways to partner, it's really a mosaic. Companies are looking to do more of those type of activities in totality with fewer people and doing less one-offs. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the third one, which I think is really important, and all bureaucracies need to focus on this, but I think it's really important to remember that you need to remove barriers to participation and collaboration. So, make it easy if a company wants to work with you as a university, and vice versa. The company should make it as easy as possible for them to collaborate with you as a university. So those 3 guiding principles, and you can look it up. You can Google guiding principles for university industry collaborations. It was a report put out by the National Academies in 2005. So, and it's on our website at UIDP. So as it relates to tools and techniques that we're talking about around collaboration, we spent a lot of time in the UIDP thinking about strategies for how to get more value from these relationships. And, in thinking about that, what I would say to you all, and something that we're working on right now, is figuring out how to be an industry-facing organization. And so, every university that has a research park would like to have more companies located on it, I would think. Most of them, maybe not all of them, but most of them. Or they want to do more work with companies to get more sponsored research or get companies to hire more of their students. And, to do that, you have to have systems in place internally to be prepared to do that. So, if you want to run a marathon, you don't just say, I want to run a marathon. You practice, you prepare, you change your eating habits. Obviously, I don't run marathons, for those of you who know me, because I'm not in marathon shape. But if you want to be a marathon runner, there's a lot of things you have to do to become capable of running 26.2 miles. And the same thing is true if you're a university and you want to do more with companies and you want to be an industry-facing organization. I think it's really important to think internally about how you are organized to engage companies and achieve outcomes of mutual interest. And so I don't think we spend enough time doing that. And that's something we're working on at the UIDP, to think about what are those characteristics that universities can adopt to be more industry engaging. And so let me give you one quick example. It's an activity that we recently completed on joint hiring and joint employment of faculty researchers who also work at a company on an ongoing basis, not for one semester, not for a year, but on an ongoing basis. What's really driving that is there are just not enough data scientists or AI researchers in the world. And so companies can hire quality faculty away from universities. And if they do that, then they're disabling the university to be able to teach the next set of students who they may want to hire. So you're now seeing relationships between universities like University of Washington, University of California, Berkeley, UC San Diego, where they're sharing talented researchers with companies like Facebook and Apple and Cisco and Intel. And why are they doing that? Well, it serves both parties' needs to do that. So, if you're a university and you're trying to recruit talent, this might be a mechanism that you can use to interest companies in co-locating onto your research campus or your tech park. So they have faculty members who can go spend time. And I know we're going to hear about the Fraunhofer model, but this certainly resonates with that model. So, maybe I'll stop there by saying that I think there's tremendous opportunities, and that companies want to work with universities even in this period of uncertainty and upheaval. And there's great opportunities, but it requires a lot of work and dedication. So I look forward to hearing from my fellow panelists, and look forward to our question and answer session in a few minutes. So thank you.
Hey, thanks, Tony. You know what? I'm going to deviate slightly from our theme just to ask you one question, and then we'll move to Fred real quick. So, I assume that right now you're busier than you've ever been because of your industry and your university partners both looking for additional sources of revenue, additional activities. Can you talk for a minute about that?
Yeah, so our membership is stronger than it's ever been. We continue to add quality members. Obviously, with the financial impact recently, we did lose a few, but our structure allows companies and universities to participate at a relatively modest cost. Everybody's trying to figure out how to leverage the outside world to achieve their outcomes, because very few organizations can do it all by themselves. Even the largest companies in the world are looking to work with universities. So, I think people are really looking for this, and this time, as you said, it's not changed.
Yeah, very busy. All right, let's move on to Fred. So Fred Schnoedenberg is the founder of Venture Fuel, and he's going to help describe accelerating corporate innovation. So Fred, the table is yours.
Thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate it, and thank you for having me, and thanks for being with this great panel. I loved a lot of the things Tony said, which I think you'll see me echo here. The first being acting in self-interest of the both sides of the table. I think it's something that's really important, as well as this idea of making it easy. So I founded Venture Fuel 7 years ago. The idea behind it, let me see here. Can I advance the slides? Jason, I don't know if, there we go. So at sort of the earliest levels here, our business is to build and accelerate innovation programs for leading companies and industries. So we're laser focused on the industry corporate side of things. You'll see some of the companies here, but they range from the Nikes of the world to Netflix, to Hershey's, General Mills, California milk industry, for instance. And with that, because we have that laser focus, and it resonates with what Tony said, is this idea of self-interest, right? We look at it 100% from the corporate lens of like, why should they be looking to startups? Why should they be looking to new technologies rather than the status quo? So we always look at what outcomes they want out of that, and we plug in, whether that's to their R&D team, whether that's their innovation group. So why do corporates even care about this? You guys know this, so I'm gonna go very fast. But this is the way corporates think about it, right? Is either they want to grow faster, they want to tap into some resource they don't have in terms of your research, or they really want disruption insurance, right? They don't want to get surprised by something coming up that a competitor gets or a startup gets well funded and blows them out of the water. But I always think of disruption and innovation as this sort of feast or famine moment. The companies that are perceived to be most innovative actually outperform their competitors. So you've got the disruption piece, but you also have the growth piece. Joy's Law is one of my favorite. I say this to corporations all the time. No matter how much money you have, no matter how great your team is, somebody out there is smart, that is doing something a little differently that could be of value. A little bit more modern day, Raja Rajmanar, he's the CMO of MasterCard. He was a guest on our podcast, and I was kind of shook by how direct this quote was. But basically, he said in his 35 years of working at some of the biggest companies in the world, almost all of the best ideas came from startups outside their walls, and that the collaboration together is what drove them forward. So I thought this was a meaningful sort of moment for corporates to think about, hey, there's value here in terms of collaboration. Our secret sauce is we have a global innovation network. This is predominantly investors. It's over 500 VCs, angels, seed investors. We do work with some university labs and would like to work more with research parks. And we also have founders and scouts that are out there. But essentially, we will come to our group and say, we've got a corporate challenge with the Hershey's or General Mills or whoever it might be. And our team does not take equity in these startups, which makes us a little different from accelerators that are out there, where maybe their bias is a little gray. We're completely unbiased. We are working for the corporation entirely. And in terms of Tony's point about working towards an actual outcome, everything we do is actionable. We try and make pilots happen. We have two sort of main ways we work with corporates. One is, I'll call it co-pilot, which is like we get in and we get embedded in their company, and it's about driving lots of tests, lots of small tests, and it's across the whole landscape, HR, marketing, supply chain. And so we're acting almost as innovation consultants there. And then the accelerate side of things, we are building corporate accelerators. And two just quick examples that are live today that we're working on. With Comcast, we're looking at mixed use facilities. So, where you've got a restaurant and also people are living there, and a grocery store and a sports stadium all in one place. What technologies and startups are out there that can make the smart city work within those environments? So we're doing a very open innovation call where we're asking for ideas. We're getting a lot actually from a number of universities, which is very interesting. And our goal there is to match that up and have a couple pilots come out of it. The Snack Accelerator is sort of the other end. This is a large corporate accelerator we're doing for the California milk industry, and that is around product innovation. So we have sourced startups that happen to have 50% dairy milk from all around the world. A number of the best ones are actually grad students that are partnering with their university. UC Davis is one of the leaders going into this sort of semifinals. And I'll stop talking right after this, but I just thought I'd leave you guys with a couple things. In the audience, we're always happy to talk with people and bring more people into that network, so feel free to email me. And then if I'm thinking about how you guys can work with more corporates, it's what problem do you solve for them? And how can you show an ROI? And to Tony's point, once you get in there, then you start to expand. You land and expand. How can you then build that into a larger relationship? And the last thing is flex your unique value proposition. What is your superpower, right? I think a lot of this has moved beyond charity from corporates, right? Which is sort of the way a lot of them looked at some things in the past. And this isn't about innovation theater. This is about, how can you drive ROI and help them achieve whatever their quarterly results are. That's it.
All right, so we have a little transition here between Fred and Peter, and so while we're doing that, I'm going to be an equal opportunity deviator, Fred, and ask you a question as well. And I promise, Peter, I'll do the same thing for you. All right, so you've just given everybody your email address to connect, but what do you see as a way for these research park leaders around the country to properly coordinate with you? Because again, based on what I've seen, prior to today and what you just said today, this is a tool that every research park would want to have in their pocket to give to one of their industry partners to help them grow to become more valuable to them as an industry partner at the research park. So what's the best way for these research park directors to coordinate with you?
Yeah, there's two paths. One is, if you're trying to help on the student sides or the research sides find opportunities, that's easy. There's nothing to it. Just shoot me an email. I'll get you on our sort of list of what opportunities come out of our corporates. The other, which you just sort of mentioned, which is somewhat more interesting, is the idea of how can we sort of plug in to the research parks and add the value of that global innovation network. So sort of outside innovation to add on top of what they're already doing. And I'm very open to that. That's just that's a little bit longer of a conversation. But that's really where we sit. Our eyes are towards the corporation and how we can help them, and we don't mind who we work with in that process. And honestly, we view this as a very collaborative world. And to the Joy's Law quote, right? Like the smartest people aren't all in the same office, no matter how great that office is. So the more we collaborate, and we're working with folks from USC, UCLA, Harvard, Cornell. So we'd like that space. We think there's a lot of fresh thinking, and I think to your point, there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration in both directions.
Very good. Well, luckily we've got some time after this. We can talk about it some more, and I'm sure we'll get some questions from the audience. So right. Now we'll move to Peter O'Neill from Fraunhofer. It's funny, for 10 years with Mike Bowman and Brian Darmody and others, I've heard of the Fraunhofer model. So now I'm excited to see and hear Peter talk about the Fraunhofer model as it relates to tools on university industry engagement.
Listen, thanks. This is Pete O'Neill. I'm Director of Business Development for the Fraunhofer Center, based out of College Park, Maryland, right across the street from the main campus of University of Maryland. Thanks to AURP, thanks to Brian Darmody. I've known Brian for longer than I care to admit. We're colleagues in government and university administration, and so I want to thank him in particular for allowing us to speak with you folks today. I'd like to go over real quick Fraunhofer. It sounds like some of you already know the Fraunhofer organization, but I assume some of you may not. I think it might help provide a little context. I'm also timing myself to make sure I stay on point here with you guys. So the Fraunhofer is Europe's largest applied R&D initiative, stood up after World War II by the German government to rebuild German industry. Today, that organization is 27,000 plus employees with 72 institutes in Germany and about another 30 international affiliates across the world. Last year did about 2.3 billion euros in research. Those 72 institutes span every possible industrial domain of research that you can think of, from ceramics to lasers to smart farming, aquaculture, you name it, they do it. And probably why the Germans are as good as they are in industrial engineering and research as they are. Clientele spans government, academia, and industry. And in particular, germane to this program, there is built-in structural incentives to work with universities. You will find most of the research institutes in Germany, as well as many overseas, are co-located with universities. And that idea is to pull good ideas out of universities. This is an applied research effort, so you may have heard of Max Planck Institutes, which do basic research primarily. The applied research analog is the Fraunhofer network. You will also find that, at least in the United States, most of the center directors that work for Fraunhofer are also teaching faculty members of the university. So in our case, Dr. Adam Porter is our executive and scientific director, also a teaching faculty member at the University of Maryland School of Computer Science, and has been doing so for about 30 years. So there really is a built-in incentive to work closely with universities, because the idea is that we're pulling good ideas off of white papers out of people's heads, and we're also supporting university PIs as they chase, in this case, because we're so close to federal government, federal grants, One thing we've noticed, and maybe some of you, is that at the universities, particularly good at doing their research, not necessarily always the best at delivering a ready-made product for the market. And there is a valley of death there, just like there is with startups, that good ideas don't get off the shelf or out of the lab. And it is really Fraunhofer's duty and mission, in part, to get those ideas out of the laboratory, validate them, de-risk them, and then hand them off to industry for the betterment of humanity. You can see there's actually 5 different centers here. We've had a little bit of consolidation over the last couple of years. But there's 5 centers. We are a 501c3. We are our own USA 501c3. The US centers were stood up about 25, 26 years ago by the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, which is supported by both the German federal and state governments. The idea being they wanted a footprint in the United States and build collaboration with universities, with industry, and with academia. And that's what we've been doing. Moving on. I'll talk about this in a minute, but in addition to everything else we've been talking about, the South Carolina Fraunhofer Alliance is something that I want to suggest might be a way to encourage universities to work with Fraunhofer to approach state governments and economic development agencies that are interested in innovation and building and strengthening their innovation economy. And this is where I want to talk about this. So for 25 years, we've been working with government, with industry, with academia. Again, the Fraunhofer model is that every center, every institute should have at least 3 revenue streams. One is some base funding from Fraunhofer itself. The second should come up from public competitive projects, so federal government agencies, state government agency, tenders, and the like. And the third is industry. They want you swimming in all 3 lanes because they want to see you as a transfer agent and a way of transferring ideas back and forth between industry, academia, and government. That's all well and good, but we felt, the Fraunhofer USA network felt we needed something more structural to offer, particularly state governments who are interested in innovation, that allowed them to buy into an idea or a partnership with us that makes it easier for us to work with them. So having worked in economic development for about 20 years for state governments, it seemed to me it was a good idea to come up with something where we could get state governors to work through a formal agreement of cooperation with the Fraunhofer to spur innovation. It would be a sustained business-driven research program benefiting small to mid-sized to large companies through a partnership that requires Fraunhofer to work with university researchers and state industry. The foundation of it is a cost-sharing incentive program whereby the state puts in some funding to use as a matching fund so that industry may approach the government and the Fraunhofer Advisory Board with transformative industrial research projects that could be partially funded through state funding. There would be an advisory board, would be part of the blueprint, consisting of government, academic, and industry leaders to guide research focus areas and steward those financial resources. In addition, this would allow for a portal to access all of Fraunhofer's worldwide network of research institutes across the world. And that is something you're going to see in the next 25 years, I trust, is much more access to all those experts and the research going on in Europe in particular that's germane to the kinds of problems that US industry is facing today. And I want to bring up South Carolina because that's where the Alliance program actually started. We signed an MOU with the South Carolina Department of Commerce and Fraunhofer back in 2017. The reason that South Carolina was particularly interested in this, and as an economic developer, I have to say this, you would drool at the kinds of companies that have moved into South Carolina over the last 20 years, particularly with regard to large manufacturing. From Boeing to Daimler to BMW's largest assembly plant in the world, South Carolina has done a terrific job in attracting foreign business into the state. What their concern was, though, is that the local supply chain was not going to be able to keep up either with the quality, the volume, and the technology that these large companies would require in order to be a preferred a local supplier. And so they came to Fraunhofer to say, we need a program whereby small and mid-sized suppliers to these companies can ensure that they are technologically adept, they're keeping up, the product innovation, the process innovation is all what a large OEM global manufacturer would require in order to have a supplier. That was kind of the driving force behind this whole idea. So they put $2 million on the table to serve as a matching fund. We focus on 4.0, Industry 4.0 solutions, such as automation, digitization, leveraging data science, AI and ML machine learning applications. The focus is not surprisingly, some of South Carolina's most important industries: automotive, aerospace, logistics, healthcare, and in general industrial. The projects underway right now, typically about a dozen at any given time, works with both major OEMs like BMW, but also the mid-sized and even smaller suppliers. And in fact, in some cases, some of the projects involve both the OEM and the supplier at the same time. Key to this is a division of labor and work packages that are assigned to the universities as well as Fraunhofer centers. So in some cases, we're working with Clemson, in some cases, University of South Carolina, in some cases, Francis Marion University, and even Trident Technical College down in Charleston, as well as NGOs that focus on economic development. So depending upon the issue, the project, we will blend a partnership according to the needs of the specific problem we're trying to solve. It's working quite well. I see further government support for the program, but it has allowed us to really begin to learn and get into the DNA of how the university research process works. In some cases, it's great, it's wonderful. They've got Clemson and USC have some great facilities there and some great folks. But there are moments where we find that they have not been as integrated into South Carolina industry and have their finger on the pulse of what needs to be done for industry. And that's where we're trying to fill in a gap where it may exist. So overall, this has been a terrific program. Our intention in the future, and I'm saying right away because I'm responsible for this program, is this alliance program we intend to roll out across the United States and offer it to other states in 2021, and do so in partnership with universities. I think we'll have less success if we go straight to state government and economic development agencies because they don't know who we are necessarily. But if we did so in partnership with state universities, I think we're going to have a better chance of convincing politicians and lawmakers and economic development agencies whose budgets are probably pretty tight right now to think about this is I think we've proven this is a terrific opportunity to really begin to try something unique and access a whole global network of researchers that otherwise no one's ever known about. And so I think you'll find the German leadership is very interested in doing this. So I think I've probably run over time, but I'll happy to answer any questions you've got.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's a great story, so I don't mind you going over time a little bit. And it looks like we're transitioning to all four of us up on the screen. But so I'll ask you one question, and then we'll get everybody involved. So I do understand that you all were heavily involved early on in the creation of MP3 players. Do you have a story on that?
Fraunhofer, Fraunhofer patented MP3 data compression technology. That's what we're probably best known for. And the royalties did flow in for many, many years. I think the license has since expired, but that is one of many, that's probably one of the best known products that have come out of Fraunhofer. However, Fraunhofer works with thousands and thousands of companies every year. And has some very, very close partnerships with those companies, particularly in Germany, given the long-term cooperation with the BMWs, the Daimlers, smaller companies. So, thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, that's great. So let me, I'm going to ask some questions, but I'm going to try to talk as least as I can. But let me just ask generally all three of you, and on my screen, it's Tony, Fred, then Pete. So Tony, you go first. Is just address first what are states? And so yesterday we learned, and this morning we learned, politics is local. All right. So this isn't a political question, but local is the key. The local manifestation of the global ecosystem is usually research parks. So what can states and regions do to improve the local ecosystem and create more university industry partnerships?
Okay. So thank you for starting with me. You know, I think as someone, and I worked in the federal government, I worked at NSF and I worked at NIH a long time ago. But I think one of the things I would say about states and local municipalities in terms of having an edge over the federal government is they are much better at piloting and testing and being more nimble to respond to opportunities. And so, you know, the Fortune 500 company for many states is the local university, right? The flagship school. So Kevin, you and I were in Arkansas over a year ago at the University of Arkansas, where we were part of a workshop looking at collaborations outside of major metropolitan areas. And in Arkansas, the university is a big deal because it's got those high paying jobs that we tend to think about. It's a magnet for recruiting companies because you need to have talent for companies to be located in your backyards. And so, you know, I think states recognize that universities are really a tremendous draw for them to meet their overall innovation ecosystem goals, and they can be much more responsive and get things done. And so I think most of us know of whatever state you're located in, there's some program or programs that a state has that it'll stand up either in reaction to an opportunity or because people said, hey, I learned about what's going on here. I think we should try to find what we can do that's similar to that. So I'm always fascinated by the ability of states to really respond much more rapidly and to do things much more focused and once again, in a very timely way.
Got it. So Fred, you have a global network, but I bet a lot of what you do depends on what happens at the very micro level. So what do you think about improving local ecosystems and for university industry partnerships?
Yeah, I mean, I think it gets down to show me the money. I think you need to show some success, right? And that can be a smaller partnership that then can expand. And there's definitely a lot of, call it fear of missing out. If you do something in one area, you can parlay that pretty nicely into the next town over, right? Or the next state over, showing success, right? Because the two things people fear is failing and then missing out on opportunity. So not to say you would manipulate either of those two, but being able to demonstrate, hey, we've done this somewhere before. Here's the success you guys can potentially hope for. Is a really powerful carrot. And once they start doing that, then you deliver and they keep renewing, right? So I think there's a lot of excitement. I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think it's a popular choice to embrace university and industry collaboration, as well as the sort of the startup innovation ecosystem. So I think I would show them where the opportunity is, whether that's money, votes, whatever's needed.
Got it. And, so Pete, same spirit of that question, but I'm going to ask it this way. You've chosen South Carolina and Maryland and Delaware, and there's others I know in the U.S., but just those three in particular. What is it about those local areas that drove your location, your co-location, and how has that location helped or hurt your university industry partnerships?
I have to be careful here. It wasn't always. I wasn't around 25 years ago when they decided where to locate these things. But I'll use Michigan because Michigan is where Fraunhofer is headquartered. Michigan was a likely site because of the automotive industry. And Fraunhofer, many Fraunhofer institutes, contributions to the auto industry. So coatings and cutting technologies and things like that. made absolute sense to drop a center in Michigan. I don't really know exactly why our Center for Microbiology was put in Newark, Delaware. As a Marylander, and with all the bio down here, I would have probably lobbied it to be there. But I have to say, in that case, it really didn't matter because that Center of Molecular Biology was our largest and had many DoD contracts to do vaccine research, for example. So in that case, it didn't matter. In Maryland, obviously, we're software engineers, right? So these guys can work across domains and software and everything. So it was very easy for us to plug into the local economy, to support university researchers. Let's face it, a biologist at at the Department of Bioengineering at the University of Maryland is really good at his domain. And he's chasing an NSF or an NIH grant to do his next year of research. But he's got to deliver data at the end of the day. And that's not what he does. He's not a data scientist. He doesn't understand the IT framework that he necessarily needs to do that. And that's where Fraunhofer can come in, at least our center, and say, we can back you up here. We can provide that kind of level of service and that technology that you need to capture the data, to visualize the data, and deliver that data back to NSF or NIH so you get your next grant. And that's why we have a dozen different projects going on at any given time with the University of Maryland for that very reason, because there's a hole in their competences with regard to IT in some cases.
Got it. I'll open this rather than specifically asking anybody. Y'all can do a free-for-all, just respond. All these universities that are the anchors of our university-related research parks are trying to expand globally, and all of you all have a global footprint in all the different things that you do. But we have trade tensions. We've got relationship tensions, whether it's the Asian tensions, European tensions. Those exist. How will university industry partnerships and relationships be impacted by those tensions between our country and other countries, or are you agnostic? So anybody can answer that.
I'll speak up, but kick things off. But in the 4 years that I've been with Fraunhofer, I have to say, in the 25 years that the Fraunhofer has been here in Maryland, they've probably spent about $22 million in payroll. So that's German taxpayer money paying for this organization here to exist and support not only U.S. industry, but also hopefully collaboration between Germany and America. And never flinched, even when things got a little dicey here in the last couple of years, never flinched in terms of support for the organization and funding for the U.S. entities, which I have to say is pretty extraordinary, what they've done. And they continue to expand not only the program, but hopefully much more collaboration, not just in the funding that they provide, but in collaboration with U.S. industry. So, I would say turmoil across the world at this particular moment, particularly between U.S. and Europe, you don't see that in Fraunhofer's support for this partnership.
Yeah, and I would say from the corporate lens, most of the corporations we work with are multinational to begin with. So they're dealing with this tension in a variety of different ways anyway, depending on which countries we're talking about. And their viewpoint is very much, where's the best idea? Where's the best opportunity to solve this problem? Knowing that there are challenges that could be there that are taken into consideration. But I feel that the one nice thing about corporations is like they're driven by the best idea, the bottom line, and then how to do it. And so they're a little less political, even if they need to navigate the waters a little bit more, depending on which countries we're talking about.
Tony, any thoughts international? I know you've got international missions that you go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just would echo what they say. A lot of multinational companies have U.S. subsidiaries that are here, which make it easier to work with. But, I think Fred hits on it. if it's in the company's inherent self-interest to work with a U.S. university and partner and locate people at a tech park, they'll do it. And if it doesn't, they won't. There are very few countries in the world where there's regulatory issues facing them if they want to locate in a U.S. Campus, university campus. So.
All right. Well, let's tackle a regulatory type question, or at least a bureaucracy question. What about intellectual property, protection of intellectual property? What are your all's thoughts on the importance of that as it relates to these university industry partnerships?
Okay, well, maybe I'll start there. I'll take it. So, intellectual property is central to the ways that companies, universities work together, but it's a means, not typically the end. And it's important to keep that in mind. So, the greatest source of technology transfer are students that are going to be hired, or faculty members that are going to consult, or be joint employed, as I mentioned earlier. It's not, some invention disclosure that's going to lead to a patent that's going to be licensed and that's going to, serve to make millions of dollars. So, while the MP3 patent was great and it generated a ton, that's really the exception, not the rule. And so, negotiating a license is a transactional activity. It really has very little to do with building a long-term strategic relationship. And so I think you need to have a really thoughtful and nuanced and sophisticated thought process around intellectual property management if you're talking about invention disclosures that lead to patents. And we could spend, a day or two or a lot longer talking about how to get to that point. But I personally do not believe that licensing of technology is directly correlated with building strategic university industry collaborations.
Pete?
It out of our lawyers' time. These IP clauses in the contracts. We are flexible in how we craft the IP ownership agreement. In some ways, it's pretty simple for us in that what we bring to the table, what we bring to a project is our own, and we can't be held back in continuing to use that in future projects. If you are paying for, the development of the technology and there's IP created, that belongs to you. We don't necessarily want to hold anybody back. We're more concerned about tools that we develop internally, and we do a fair amount of internal research to develop our own proprietary tools, particularly in the software testing in particular, technologies. But our lawyer may say differently, but we try our best to be as flexible as we can in ownership, depending upon who's paying the bills to develop the product. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't articulate it any further than that. But that's kind of been our mantra for the last couple of years, and it hasn't been an impediment. We fight with our own lawyer more than we fight with the client on IP. Mm-hmm. Because they've got a job to do and to protect us. But that's kind of our outlook in College Park.
Fred, any thoughts on IP question?
Yeah, I would echo what these gentlemen just said. I don't think there are a lot of nefarious intentions in this, right? And most people, when they get involved in this type of partnership, are looking for a longer term partnership. So IP protection is crucial. And you need to have your lawyers on both sides sort of iron out what is fair. But to me, it's more of it's almost like getting into procurement. Like, you need to do it, you need to lay it out. And for the most part, there's not a lot of crossover. And to Tony's point, it's really talent that moves back and forth is really the piece where, you really start to move and get into gray areas, less so the actual hardware or software.
Got it. Fred, one thing that I wanted to ask you in particular was you've got this, again, this great network, industry, some universities. What about federal labs? What about those that are doing federally sponsored research? Is there a connection that you see that fits your all's model?
Yeah, 100%. We haven't spent a lot of time on it. And I will say for probably completely unfair, biased reasons, is as soon as you say federal, I hear slow, right? Yeah. Which isn't fair. And we've actually gotten to know the Air Force pretty well recently, and love how they're approaching all of this. So I know that that's not fair, but we're lean by design. We're a small team, and so a lot of times our mind goes either to like really bright research and university collaborations, or to the VC space where they're moving quick, because what I want to do is move 3 times faster than my corporations do, and then drag them with us, right, to get them to where they need to go. So I believe we should be, and we would like to be, but it has not been an area of focus.
Yeah, because that has been a focus for, those federal labs, over the years. Several of them have said, we want to open our campus. We want to create these industry partnerships. So I could see you being it's almost a motivator to get the labs to move quicker, because you could bring a number of industry relationships to them that they desperately would desire.
Yeah, and I think at the quick, right, I mentioned it before, like the industries, they just want the best ideas. They don't care where they come from. And right. So I think once they can see that this is worthwhile, I think that's the moment. So, if anyone's in the audience from that group, let's talk, because I think there are opportunities for certain.
And I know there are some. That's why I asked the question.
Good, I figured.
All right, so like in the previous session about the elections, I couldn't believe that we went a whole hour without saying COVID. We've done the same thing here. But I'll ask a COVID question, just a general question. How has, whether it's physical separation, whether it's the way companies work, how has that impacted university industry relations from your all's perspective? I'll point to Pete first.
Software engineers can work anywhere, right? So we haven't let up on the volume of work, the pace of work at all. In fact, it's probably grown a bit with industry and with university at the same time. So we're very lucky. Some of our laboratory obviously were a little hindered at the outset because guys couldn't get into the laboratories up in Michigan in particular. So there was that. But we have COVID-based projects now, looking at rapid diagnostic technologies, among others. So, and COVID mask efficiency studies and things like that. So, good or bad, there is money being funneled through the federal government to resolve these problems. And Fraunhofer's been playing a role at several of its centers in there. So.
Excellent. Tony, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so, the COVID issue affected people, and means they had to make rapid changes to what they were doing. And so I'll just give one, quick example. When this broke and people realized, well, we're not going to be able to travel, the whole internship model was flipped, right? Because most of those internship models we're typically on site. We did a quick survey of our members and found that a lot of companies were switching to virtual models. And, one thing I learned hosting a session similar to this was one of our member companies, VMware, took the travel and per diem money that they typically give students, and they gave that to the students to set up an in-home office and to pay for, high-speed internet connectivity, a computer, and a standing desk and a chair, right? So they were able to accomplish their goals, which was to get the student engaged with the company, and they used a different modality to do that, and they were able to continue. So, I think what we've seen is I think we've seen a lot of adaptation fairly rapidly. And then, the second thing I'll just make a real quick point on is, and you and I have talked about this, when we have a crisis and there's a sense of urgency, we seem to be able to get things done quickly. So, if you look at what's going on with the vaccine development. You know, the most pessimistic people I have heard believe that, you know, we're going to have something available by April. That's just over a year to get to a vaccine, which is unheard of. Why? Because it was an existential threat. And people said, let's not worry about a lot of these little issues, let's focus on the big issues. And so, you know, there is, it shows our ability to solve big societal problems. And what the question is, can we translate that? So I urge the people on this call, you can Google urgency of science. It's something that's been recently stood up out of the Valley. Just looking at this whole issue, how do you tackle big problems with a sense of urgency and speed?
Couldn't be more appropriate, Tony. Thank you. I think that's great. Fred, any other thoughts on COVID?
Yeah, COVID did. Our clients went in two directions, like almost instantly. They either retrenched back into the tried and true and said, "Hold on, we don't want to do anything that we haven't proven out, and we're not going to take an ounce of risk," which in some cases was very prudent for them to do. I would say the more progressive clients took the other approach, which was, we just saw what happens when we're not ahead of the curve and ready to adopt to the Zoom media calls on a dime, and how do our entire companies work remotely. So we're doubling down on innovation, and we're going to spend our focus and time on making sure that we are lean and agile and we can do all these things. And the VMware is a great example, right? How do you think creatively in a time of stress to deliver for your employees, make sure they're safe, but also create, you know, there's a lot of disruption, right? There's a whole new world. There's a whole new way of e-commerce working and things like that. So a lot of our clients put the pedal down on the gas and said, let's really make sure that we're at the forefront of any changes that are happening so we don't get caught playing defense.
That's fantastic. Well, that's all I have. Does anybody have any comment before I wrap up? Any other thought? Anything we didn't cover?
Just want to thank you once again for letting me be part of this, Kevin. Appreciate it. Appreciate the AURP community. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I will tell you, like I said at the beginning, you know, every research park that is in attendance, all 260 different organizations that are represented, have university industry engagement as, if not the #1 priority, it's in the top 5 priority. You know, university presidents, federal lab leaders, they're all thinking about how to enrich and enhance their university industry, lab industry relationships. So, you know, you three are not talking about the election, but you're talking about something much more important to our lab and our research park directors. So thank you, Tony. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Fred. We appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Thanks, everyone.
Great.